So I have the honor of introducing Ann Hutchison. I found this gem of an organization called the Chamber of Commerce back when I started my business back in 2010. And this has been such a wonderful group of people to work with. It's a small organization, not huge, but every one of them is dedicated to the improvement of this city and this region. So David May retired, 2 years ago now? And Ann has taken over his place as the president and CEO of the organization. Welcome, Ann. Thanks for presenting today.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for having me join you today. Excited to share some thoughts. And we're just going to get right into it. Oh, sorry. Here we go. I'm going to talk a little bit today about who we are as an organization. I'm happy to announce that the Rotary Clubs as a collaborative have joined the Chamber of Commerce. And you might have some preconceived notions about what a chamber is. I'm going to tell you about who we are today and hopefully then open your eyes to those opportunities that you now have as members of Rotary to access our opportunities, but also our network of information that we believe is helping to make a great Fort Collins. I always like to provide a little bit of context before I jump into some conversations. And you all live in this beautiful community, but as a reminder, this is Northern Colorado. And I always like to share a few data points because sometimes they're surprising. We're up to a place of Northern Colorado, and when I use that phrase, I'm talking about Larimer and Weld counties together, but we're approaching a little more than 700,000 people in this two-county space. We have some pretty strong per capita income in this area at $55,497. We're growing older as a two-county area, despite the fact that we have 4 higher education institutions in Northern Colorado. We continue to we're starting to see our age creep up over time. You can see that we're a highly educated area in the state. The subcontext there is the fact that we've actually been importing a lot of that knowledge base more recently. We're not necessarily growing our own college graduates anymore in Northern Colorado. We're actually importing them from other places. Strong median house prices to the point that for many, it is a crisis situation where it's more challenging to live in this area. And then I always like to remind people of where we employ people in Northern Colorado. We oftentimes think about business, but the reality is our single largest employers in Northern Colorado are represented by government, whether that's city, county. We have tremendous state office presence here in Northern Colorado. But we also have federal office presence in Northern Colorado. Then you follow that right up with education. And then you start to get into our technology leaders that are employing a number of folks across the two-county area. And then I always like to celebrate the fact that we do have a strong regional gross product. So we have $35 billion worth of economic activity that spins throughout this two-county area. So let's do some Chamber 101. You can see here, and we are defined as an organization of business people and professionals that have voluntarily, that's a key word there, joined to promote and protect the commercial interests and community quality of life in a specific geographic area. You'll also note that we are a 501c6. We're not a 501c3, which would be a charitable organization. We're a 501c6, which is a business association. So where did chambers get started? My predecessor, David May, does a beautiful job of telling the story. I just kind of hijacked it and tell it a one-off. But back before we were even a colony or anything else, in Marseille, France, there was a group of business people that came together with their carts and their horses and their families, and they came together to protect themselves because they were constantly being attacked by marauders. So again, voluntarily coming together in a regional area to protect the interests of business. That concept made its way over the seas and landed in North America in 1768. Today, we have almost 2,000 chambers that are operating across the United States. You can see that we're an organization that's been around for a bit. We were established in 1904 and have been one of the longest existing businesses in Northern Colorado with that history. Again, you'll see chambers across the United States. We like to say that if you've met one chamber, you've met one chamber. We're all actually independent organizations. You will see us collaborate with each other and cooperate with each other, but at the end of the day, we are each our own organization that has really no required authority or reporting back to any other organization. Our largest chamber across the U.S. is the California State Chamber. They have almost 12,000 members. And here in Fort Collins, we're actually the third largest chamber in the state of Colorado with almost 1,200 members. We like to remind people who we are not before we then tell them about who we are. We are not a charitable organization. We'll support a lot of charitable activities, but we're not a charitable organization. We actually are not a part of any part of government. That's oftentimes a surprise to people. They assume a chamber is a part of government. We are not. We're also not a social club. We do a lot of social activities, but we're not a social club. We're also not an employment agency, but yet we provide a lot of connections to people that are in search of employment. And then we are not officially a weather bureau, but let me tell you, even with the advent of Google, you would be shocked at the questions that make it to our phone number, to our main line. We're happy to answer those questions, but that's not really our primary role in the community. I really want to emphasize this point of being independent. Again, because we all have similar names. You might hear about the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. You might hear about the Colorado Chamber of Commerce. You might hear about the Weld County Area Chamber of Commerce. Despite us all having that Chamber of Commerce in our title, we are independent organizations. And therefore, we have those opportunities to collaborate, but we don't have any responsibility back to each other. I think that's really important as we talk about things like the U.S. Chamber. They have a lot of positions that align very perfectly with the business interests here in Northern Colorado, but they also, frankly, have a lot of statements that we don't necessarily agree with. So we choose when we're going to align and when we're not, because we're representing Northern Colorado. Let's jump ahead. So a little more detail about who we are. So as mentioned, we're the third largest chamber in the state, almost 1,200 members. We do have a $2 million budget, and that funding comes from our members. We have 12 people, or 12 belly buttons, we like to say, that are a part of our organization. 7 of us are full-time staff, 5 then work in some form of a part-time capacity. We are a 5-star accredited chamber. So we've gone through a rigorous process where we've had a third party analyze who we are as an organization, our process, our policies, our execution. And with that accrediting body, you can either be accredited or 1 to 5 stars. We're proud to say that we are a 5-star chamber, so the very top of that evaluation structure. We've been in that space for 20 years. We've been accredited as a 5-star chamber. We were able to say until last week that we were the only 5-star accredited chamber in Colorado. And while part of me is heartbroken, part of me is very excited that the Castle Rock Chamber has just achieved 5-star accreditation this last year. So know that your chamber is going through a rigorous self-evaluation process to make sure that they're serving the community well. You'll note that we talk about our book of business. We provide a lot of content around member connections, but we're also a very strong advocate for business. We're the single organization here in Northern Colorado that will stand up and make sure to share those unintended consequences as well as those opportunities for business as we're setting policy throughout the area. And again, we like to remind people, mostly because every once in a while we have to kick them in the shins, but we don't receive any funding from the city or the county. We've spent the last year really working hard to define and articulate exactly who we are. So you just saw a lot of metrics. You saw a lot of things that we're not, but we've adopted this phrase, and we'll be using this phrase over the next several years, that we truly are building community through business. It's not just a phrase, it's how we function. And we like to remind people that we are the trusted business champion, catalyst, and convener, and that we're creating shared economic prosperity for Northern Colorado. You'll also see we talk about how we do that work, and we are going to do that with a lot of courage. We're going to do it through advocacy, and then we're going to be leaders in the space. So what does that look like on the ground? Connections are a very important part of our experience as Chamber. We had 7 signature events last year that had almost 2,000 attendees. You can see the list there. We hope that you, again, as new members of our organization, will consider and attend and celebrate alongside us. Great opportunities for you to build your book of business as well as to build your connections as Rotarians. In addition to those large-scale events, we do a lot of small, medium-sized, and online experiences. Most of those will have an education base or a networking focus. So you can see we've had almost, by the time you do all the math, almost 200 events that we've offered to our community relative to the Chamber. While connections are important and a high part of our experience, we also like to talk about the big 4 or the goals that we're working on your behalf every single day in the community. And we put this under the banner of what we call Northern Colorado Prospers. And that's our effort to really make sure that we're taking on issues of most importance to the community and moving the dial effectively on that. Based on the work that we've done with business over the last really 15 years, we've identified that these are 4 goal areas that we're going to stay highly focused on. The first is reigniting and rebuilding our economy. The second is around attracting, retaining, and aligning talent. Our third is to finish widening North I-25, but also start talking about some regional roadways. And then number 4 is to advance a business-friendly environment. So what does that look like when we get on the ground? Our economy is really about reframing and talking about our economy in a 2-county space. We've spent a lot of time talking about a Fort Collins economy, maybe a Larimer County economy. The reality is we are very connected to Weld County alongside Larimer. So we're going to stay highly focused in helping our government friends that are working in this space to be effective, to make sure that we're growing the right companies here in Northern Colorado and that we're attracting the right companies to Northern Colorado. We also know that innovation is going to have to be a huge center point for this re-energizing of our economy. So Colorado State ends up being a very important partner as we continue this work. And then we've been in the space of providing data. We've hired experts to help tell the story of what does our economy look like today and what can it look like in the future. When we talk about talent, we are just going to town. We've been in this space for about 7 years, working hard to change the workforce system here in Northern Colorado to make sure that we're actually creating the workforce that business needs, rather than just putting people into a job because there's a job. We want to make sure that there's some intentionality around that. And so you can see here some of the growth of the work we've been doing in this space. It's raining money from the feds and the state. We're trying to capture as much of that as possible and then deploy it back into our 2-county area to make sure that we're creating the workforce of the future. You can see some of that work is in sector partnerships. That's a concept where we're bringing industry together, inviting them to identify their pain points, and then using a collaborative group behind the scenes to help them address those pain points. We've got 3 sector partnerships that have a long history. Those are health, manufacturing, and construction. At the same time, we're launching new partnerships. We have a brand new one around hospitality. We also have a new one around nonprofit, and we're looking at 2 additional sector partnerships before the end of the year. One around financial services, and then the final one around IT. We continue to be strong advocates when it comes to how can we do this work better, and how do we make sure that the ecosystem allows us to create the workforce you need. We already talked about that we're finishing the work on I-25. A year ago, I couldn't have said this, but today I can. We officially have the funding and the commitment by CDOT to finish the construction of 3 lanes from Fort Collins at Highway 14 all the way down to Longmont. Yeah, right? Yeah. So I have to apologize because it will be painful for another 3 years because once we clean up all of the cone work that you are experiencing right now, we're going to pick all of that and move that to just outside of Berthoud and keep it going. But by the time we're done, we will have 3 lanes. We know that having a reliable, effective transportation system is incredibly important to us here in Northern Colorado. Once we get more than an hour from DIA, our economic opportunities actually begin to collapse upon us. We have to keep that system working. We also believe that a functioning regional airport is a key component of that. And we need to start talking about those regional roadways. We now have this backbone that we think will begin to function more effectively. The real question then becomes, how do you get to the backbone? We know that we have to start talking about Highway 34. Even though we live in Fort Collins, most of you live here or work here, if Highway 34 doesn't function well, all the way from Greeley to the national park, neither is Fort Collins. So you'll see us beginning to talk about those regional roadways and why they're important to your business as well as to our community. And then finally, we're going to stand up and continue to be an advocate for a business-friendly environment. We've grown our team in this space, we've added some resources, and we're going to stay very, very strong on issues that have unintended consequences to business. We want to make sure that our policymakers understand when they make a decision, what's going to be the impact back on business and employees, as well as the larger community. So you'll continue to see us standing up at City Hall, making sure that we're building relationships with city and county staff, as well as their leaders, and really making sure that we're doing good things to have business grow in a way that makes sense for Northern Colorado. As you see with those big 4 issues, we have a very strong regional focus, and that has been a little bit of the secret sauce for the Fort Collins area chamber. We've been of a size and have the capacity in order to lead in these spaces, and we'll continue to do that relative to these issues. So with that, let me pause, answer questions. Anything's fair game.
So since I have the microphone, I get to ask first. Somebody asked this morning, how can we leverage the chamber to get visibility for our Peach Festival coming up in August? You heard about that. Donors, participants, whatever.
You bet. So again, one of those valuable benefits of membership is you, first of all, have access to our communication tools. We talk regularly over the course of a week with almost 7,000 business people throughout Northern Colorado. So we'll make those available to you as Rotary. I'm very excited to be able to begin to talk about the things that you're doing, but especially with the Peach Fest. And then I'll be very honest, as I was sitting there, I was thinking, we should maybe be one of those businesses somebody calls and we talk about sponsorship. So I'm going to tag Sherry just because I see her a lot. But we would certainly enjoy that conversation. And I think there is a place for us to financially, as well as with our media tools, support the festival.
Maybe a major sponsor.
Well, I don't know about that. But certainly we can come to the plate.
So my first curiosity is, can you substantiate the rumor that March is our snowiest month?
Well, because I don't have my Google machine in front of me, I may or may not be able to answer that. But yes, it actually is. We do know that, and that's a question we get a lot.
My other question is there's a fantastic advocacy newsletter. Can you tell us about it?
Yes. Oh, thank you, Sherry. You're a good plant for me. So as mentioned, we're really trying to elevate the knowledge base of our community around civic issues and how they interact with business. One of the tools that we've created then is a monthly advocacy newsletter. So once a month, we release an electronic newsletter that tells that story, that talks about current issues that are making their way through City Hall, any work that we've done in order to be an advocate for business, as well as a preview of things that might be down the road. If you're interested in signing up, which we would love all of you to do, you can go straight to our website, or you can even just hand me your card before we leave today, and I'd be happy to add you to the newsletter database. You can then, if you find it to be valuable, that's great. And if it's too much, you can always opt out, but we would love to have you be a part of that growing knowledge base of issues and how they impact business. Thanks, Sherry.
Yeah, I've been here since the 60s and lived through a few recessions.
Yes.
What do you think's happening for economy in the next year or two?
Yeah, such a fascinating question, and one that I continue to have a lot of curiosity around. Despite that curiosity, I think we are well positioned in Northern Colorado in a way that we're not necessarily seeing across the country. So it's fascinating. Every single call I'm on with our federal delegation, whether it's our senators, our House of Representatives, they're all talking about imminent recession. At the same time, I oftentimes walk out of those meetings and I walk to downtown Fort Collins and I see that there's a line at 10 a.m. to get into Urban Egg, right? So despite some of these national indicators, we're not necessarily seeing that impact here in Northern Colorado. People are still creating jobs. Colorado is one of the biggest job growers in the US right now, and Northern Colorado is completely aligned with that. We're continuing to see people spend here in Northern Colorado. We're continuing to see people lean in on innovation. Some of the things that are coming out of Innosphere Ventures are life-changing technologies, and that work is happening here. So I appreciate that we're all anxious about what is the national narrative, but I think when you compare the national narrative to the local narrative, we're actually very well positioned with a diverse economy to be able to survive the big R word, or maybe even a slight recession here in Northern Colorado. Yeah.
So I have a
Oh, hi, Diane.
a comment and then a question. My comment is that for leadership, the chamber always did a presentation about how our economy works, and I always thought that was so effective because a lot of times people don't understand that in order to have a lot of the amenities that we do through government, you have to have a really strong local business economy. And so whatever we can do to really reinforce that sort of basic message would be helpful.
Yeah.
My two questions are, one, what is the chamber's role related to this whole issue of affordable housing? And then you mentioned the airport. How do you think that is a key to also our economy in Northern Colorado?
Yeah, thanks for those questions, Diane. So under that goal that we talk about talent and how can we make sure that we're creating a talent base here in Northern Colorado, we've identified that there's really 3 barriers to people going back to work or entering into our workforce. The first one is housing. So the chamber has been in the role of an educator around housing for the last 7 years. We've been standing up an organization that we call No Co Housing Now. That's our effort to tell the story around things that have worked across the country, things that are working locally, unintended consequences of policy decisions as it relates back to the attainability or the affordability of housing. And we create that space for our entire community to learn alongside us. So you'll see this Friday, we have a No Co Housing Now all partnership meeting. Everyone's invited. It's an online, 90-minute conversation with a presenter and then time to ask questions. So again, if you haven't registered yet, come to the Fort Collins Chamber website. It's right there on the front page, and you can register today to join us for that lunchtime conversation. Additionally, then all of the conversations we've had in the past are archived on our website and available for you to see. So that's our education arm. Separately though, we're now a part of what we call One Voice Northern Colorado. And that's an effort where we're bringing together all of us that are working in this housing space. The Chamber, Habitat for Humanity, Neighbor to Neighbor, the United Way, the home builders, bringing together all of those voices and making sure that we're all sharing the same messages when it comes to policy decisions and advocacy around why attainable housing is important to a community. So you'll see two sides to that coin, and a lot of my time is spent reminding policymakers that you can say that housing is important every day of the week. You can even spend some money on housing, but if every other night at City Council, you're making decisions that raise the cost of living in Fort Collins or raise the cost of the creation of housing in Fort Collins, there's not a win. And so you'll see us highly focused on that. Again, a key barrier. The other two barriers, in case you were curious, housing is number one. Number two is transportation, making sure that people can get around the region effectively. And the number three is childcare. And you want to talk about another really big, interesting, hard to get your arms around issue. It's childcare. We have to increase the number of spots we have for children in childcare settings. We have to increase the resources to help pay for those spots, and we have to increase the workforce. It's that super conundrum of we want more spaces, that's going to take more people, but it's not a high-paying job. And if cost is already a barrier, but we need to increase wages, how do you make those two live together and impact the community? And then what was your second question, Diane? Yeah, regional airport. Yeah. So, we are so fortunate to have a regional airport. I'm not sure that we oftentimes appreciate how valuable that resource is here in Northern Colorado. I think it's become less obvious to us as it becomes more and more private air service. But without an airport, we get further and further away from the rest of the world. And our philosophy is we have to invest more in that airport. We also have to create a governance system that makes it easier for the airport to grow and do the things they need to. Right now, its management is under two different city councils that have different views of the world, and very difficult to get anything done when mom and dad might be fighting over what the kids should do. I know. I'm talking with the study manager this afternoon. Yes.
Do you think that Amazon will help the airport?
It should, although Amazon is telling us that they don't plan to land any planes at the airport in order to service that new facility. So it is definitely a ground-based facility at this point. And our understanding is the technology that they're really studying and interested in is drone-based versus airport or on the ground-based, which will be super fascinating. The facility that's being built right now will be the single most robotic intensive facility that Amazon has in their entire network. So number one, super exciting that that's happening here, that we can be a test bed for Amazon across the country. As well, I'm hopeful that high level of technology will also then create jobs that are not just pickers making $15 an hour or $19 an hour, but will create that opportunity for managers running robots that are going to need a special skill set, and therefore we can make sure that they have a wage attached to that. So, but right now, like I said, all of their comments are they don't plan to land any planes relative to service to that facility at the regional airport.
So Anne, I noticed on your slide that you all counted as a success to not have a $19 minimum wage. But yet we talk about the fact that without a livable wage, people can't afford housing. I mean,
Yep.
at even $19 an hour, it's $40,000 a year. You
Yeah.
can't have housing, childcare,
Correct.
and survive on that amount of money. So
Yeah.
what's the chamber doing in that area?
Yeah.
Because it's a complex situation.
It is absolutely complex, nuanced situation, and I really appreciate the question. So, number one, I want to set the stage by acknowledging that we saw the single greatest increase in average wages in Northern Colorado over the last 3 years that we've had any time in our history. Classically, Fort Collins especially, a job in Fort Collins compared to a job in Denver has classically been priced 20% under what people are paying for the same work in Denver. That's because we've always said we have housing affordability, quality of life, all of the parts and pieces. That gap has gone away. And we are in fact paying very similar, if not better wages than we're seeing in Denver. So number one, the market has responded. Business has stepped up and is paying for quality work by quality people. Number two, we just don't think that local government should be interacting into that relationship. We believe we should continue to provide opportunities for business to learn, to grow, to be great employers, and to pass that success along to their employees. We just don't think that local government has the capacity or the understanding of how wages work. So we're under a state law now that local governments can consider that, passing a local minimum wage that is above and beyond the state minimum wage. We just don't think that that's a power that local government should consider. We think that that should be a direct relationship between the employer and the employee. The last thing I'll note is, unfortunately, we do have a lot of entry-level workers in our community that are on the edge of social success. And all of those programs, childcare support, housing support, food stamps or SNAP, all of those are set on a national metric. And so we have the reality of an unintended consequence of a forced raise of a minimum wage to $19 an hour that would immediately cut off, for many of those people living on the edge, their access to $20,000 worth of childcare, or $500 a month worth of food, or access to a housing voucher, because those are all managed by a federal number, not necessarily titrated back to a local number. We're concerned about that, and we don't want employees to have to make those choices.
Thank you. And I know other people have questions. Are you going to be around for a few minutes?
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
Thank you so much.